The night was as thick as ink, and the shadows were darkened along the wilderness. The cold wind wrapped around the rotten soil and shattered over a deserted ruin. Casar Shadow Bone squatted beside a slump of steels, holding a broken sheepskin in his hand. The edges had been worn out, and a winding line was outlined with faded ink. He glanced down, and the dim moonlight barely illuminated the point marked with blood-red ink on the map, the Dungeon of the Dragon. In the story, there is a giant dragon soul that was destroyed thousands of years ago, and it also contains a taboo power that can make people fall into life. He raised his head and looked over the wilderness. The mountains far away were like giant crawling animals, with shadows heavily pressing between heaven and earth. That is his destination, and it is still a few days away. Casar pulled the broken black robe on his body, covering half of his face, revealing only a pair of cold eyes. His skin was almost transparent, his finger bones were clearly distinguished, like dead branches, and there was still a black magic shadow on his fingertips. That was the trace left by the magic of the dead spirit. In order to make a stop, he summoned a skeleton horse. Now the thing was standing far away, with the faint green light flashing in his empty eyes, waiting patiently for him. "It's a dead wind," Casar murmured, a low voice in his throat, like a reply from the underground. He stuffed the map into it, stood up, and patted the dust on his hands. His family, the Shadow Bone clan, was slaughtered cleanly by a group of people who called themselves the Sanctuary of the Flame Riders a few months ago, and he was the only one who survived. Those people shouted pure and strange in their mouths, but even his young sister didn't let it go. Casar still remembers the scene where the flames devour everything that night, and the screams of his sister before her death. The sound was carved into his brain like a knife, torturing him day and night. Revenge. He lived for these two words. The power behind the Holy Flame Riders is too great, and he can't fight alone, unless he can get the power in the Dragon Dungeon. In the story, the dragon soul there can resurrect the dead and allow a person to possess the power to destroy the heaven and earth. Just wake it up, Casar can make the shattered gangs of those knights kneel under his feet and beg him to die. "Let's go, don't be stunned." He snatched his hands at the skeleton horse, and the pile of bone racks immediately took a step forward, making a sound of a squeak, and following him. Casar's pace was not fast, but each step was as steady as an iron smashing the ground. He knew that this road was not simple, and the great land of desolation was not a good place. This wilderness was full of wandering wilderness, strong fowls, and those cursed dead spirits. But he was not afraid. As a spirit wizard, he was born to deal with death. He could even hear the wandering spirits in the low words, like voices, or like crying. They were begging him to let them go, or devour them. After walking for half the night, Casar finally found a broken small village in the wilderness. The village had long been deserted, the top of the wooden house collapsed, the streets were covered with grass, and only a few skinny wild dogs were searching for something. He picked a house that was still complete and pushed it in. A musty smell came over his nose. With a flash of his hand, a group of green flames ignited at his fingertips, illuminating the room. The room was empty, with only a table with legs broken and a few piles of wood. "Let's just write it together for a night," he said to himself, took out the map from it, laid it on the table, and carefully studied the route. The map is very old, and he can't understand some of the symbols on it at all, but he can feel that this is not simple. When he first found this map in his family's library, there was a broken note next to it, which was recorded in the place called Dungeon of Dragons, which was said to be the sacred land when giant dragons coexisted with humans 1,000 years ago. Later, due to a magic disaster, giant dragons were almost decisive. Their bones were sealed there and became the goal of countless humans. Casar's fingers slid on the map, stopping next to a symbol marked with the skull. The notes mention that there may be a guard here, who will examine every attempt to enter the dungeon. He didn't know what the guard was, but he just told him that this wouldn't be a good guy to deal with. Just as I was thinking, a low roar suddenly came from outside the house, like a wilderness or a human voice. Casar raised his head suddenly, and the green flames between his fingers jumped. He walked to the door, pushed a zither open, and looked out. Under the moonlight, a hunched figure stood on the open space in the middle of the village, wearing a broken cloak and a twisted wooden stick in his hand. The man lowered his head, muttering words in his mouth, and the air around him began to become cold, and black air emerged from the ground. Another desperate wizard? Castle glanced at his eyebrows, his voice pressing very low. He could feel the magic power emitted from the other party, just like him, carrying a heavy breath of death. However, this guy's magic is much stronger than his, so strong that it makes him feel a little nervous. The figure seemed to have noticed something, and turned over suddenly. The face under the cloak was hidden in the shadow, with only a pair of eyes flashing with the blue light, looking straight at Castle. Casar's heart tightened and quietly stepped back, pressing his hand against the dagger at his waist. He is not afraid of fighting, but he should not cause trouble. Young man, don't hide. I know you're here. The figure opened his mouth, the sound of sand rubbing like sandpaper, carrying an inexplicable pressure. Castle was stunned for a moment, but he didn't expect the other party to directly break it. He hesitated for a second, and then pushed the door open and walked out, standing at the door, looking at the other party coldly. I don't look for trouble, you'd better not look for trouble. Casar's voice was low, with a warning. The green flame in his hand was leaping, ready to turn into an attack shape at any time. The figure smiled lowly, as if mocking or admiring. Casar heard the sound of a woman. She lifted her cloak and exposed a face full of patterns. Her skin was as dry as a tree, and her eyes were deep, like two black holes. She looked at Castle, her eyes as if she could see through his soul. My name is Vilma Kuhan, boy, you have a familiar smell. You are a descendant of the Shadow Bone family, right? Her words made Casar's heart tremble, and his fingers clenched the dagger unconsciously. He didn't expect that the other party would directly point out his identity, let alone that she would know the surname Shadow Bone. Who are you? How do you know my family? Casar's language was filled with rings, and he stepped slightly, and prepared to call the skull horse to run away at any time. Vilma grinned and showed a yellow-black teeth. Don't be nervous, I have some friendship with your old man. But looking at your wolf, I guess the Shadow Bone family is gone, right? It's hard to be strange. The dead spirit master has never been a popular guy. Castle didn't say anything, just stared at her coldly. He didn't like the old woman's temperament, but he didn't think she knew a lot of things he wanted to know. Say, what are you going to do in this deserted village? Look at your strategist, it shouldn't be as simple as the road. Vilma slowly approached him with a wooden stick, stepping lightly like a ghost. Casar hesitated for a moment, and decided to try it out. I'm going to the dungeons of giant dragons. He said directly, his eyes fixed on Vilma's face, trying to see her reaction. Sure enough, Vilma's eyes changed, becoming deeper, as if there were countless secrets hidden. She stopped and was silent for a few seconds before she said in a low voice, Dungeon, that's not a good place, boy. Do you know what's buried there? Not just power, but curse, and the darkness that will devour your soul. You go there, you'll never come. I don't care. Castle sneered, his verbal expression must be like iron. I have my reason, no one can hold me. Vilma looked at him with a complex look, as if he was regretful and helpless. After a long time, she sighed, young people are always so moved. Well, since you are so heartbroken, I can't hold you back. But I can help you, at least let you not die too quickly. Casar raised his eyebrows, and he didn't expect the old woman to make such a suggestion. He instinctively distrusts her, but he also feels that there is an indescribable aura in her, which makes people inexplicably convinced. Help me? Why? What are you thinking? He asked bluntly, without hiding his doubts. Vilma smiled, without answering directly, but turned around and walked out of the village. Come with me, there are some things, just walk around. The dungeon is not a place you can enter as long as you want. Without some preparation, you can't even pass the first door. Casar hesitated for a moment, looked at the broken house behind him, and then looked at Vilma's back. Finally, he still gritted his teeth and followed. He didn't know what medicine this old woman sold in Calabash, but he just told him that she might really be a key person. Two people walked in the wilderness, one in front and one behind, and the moonlight stretched out their shadows. Vilma didn't walk fast, but every step was as stable as if it was rooted in the soil. As she walked, she said in a low voice, "The dungeon was 1,000 years ago. I and several veterans guarded that place that year. But that's another story. You just need to know that death is hidden in every corner there, and curses are floating in the air. You want to wake up the soul of the dragon, but have you ever thought about it? That thing is not something you can control." Casar didn't say anything, but just listened silently. He knew that Vilma said it was right. In the history of the deadly magician, no one has truly controlled the soul of the dragon. The person who tried to summon the slaughter would die and become a monster that was more destined than death. But he had no choice. The flame of revenge had burned his sanity. He could catch everything and try it. After about an hour left, they came to a forest of dry trees. The trees were twisted as if they were cursed, and the branches stretched into the sky like claws, and the air was filled with a rotten smell. Vilma stopped, turned over, and looked at Casar. "This forest is the first link to the dungeon, with something unclean. You'd better prepare it and don't drag my back." Casar clicked a little, and the green flames between his fingers ignited again, illuminating the area of several meters around. He could feel something in the woods was judging them, as if countless eyes were hiding in the darkness, and his low voice became clearer and clearer, as if it was directly in his brain. "Come on, let me see how good you have." Vilma had a lick of her voice, and then she stepped into the woods. Casar took a deep breath, suppressed the anxiety in his heart, and followed her into the darkness. The air in the forest became even colder, as if it could hold people's bones. Every step Casar could hear the sound of the broken leaves under his feet, and some inexplicable low birds, like crying sounds coming from afar. He held the dagger tightly and prepared for a sudden attack at any time. Vilma walked in front, and the wooden stick hit the ground lightly. With each knock, a circle of black waves appeared on the ground, as if something was not clean. This place is called the Dead Soul Forest. It was the first line of defense in the Dragon Dungeon that year. Vilma's voice was low, with a reminiscent of memory. "The trees here are stained with the breath of death, and even the souls are trapped in it, turning into resentment. The sounds you hear, are they asking for help, or curse?" Casar clicked the head, but didn't say anything. He could hear those sounds, and even understand some vague words, such as "let me go out and kill me." He knew that this was his talent, the death spirit, which allowed him to talk directly to the death spirit. But he never liked this ability because those sounds always made him feel that he was too close to death. Suddenly, a man's face was cracked on the tree next to him, his eyes were two black holes, and his sharp screams came from his mouth, and he rushed towards Casar. He reacted quickly, and with a swept his hand, the green flame turned into a fire whip, slapped it hard on the face, making a slight cry, and the thing instantly turned into a group of black smoke and disappeared. "The response is good." Vilma glanced back at him, with a slight praise in his language, "but this is just an appetizer, the real trouble is still behind." Casar ignored her and just wiped the cold sweat from her head silently. He knew that this forest was just the beginning, and the real challenge was waiting for him in the dungeon of giant dragons. But no matter what was ahead, he would not retreat. The road to revenge is not an easy way to go. Deep in the Dead Soul Forest, a low roar came from a secret, like some huge creature awakening. Casar and Vilma glanced at each other and both saw the ring in the eyes of each other. They knew that the things in this forest were far more than just complaining about the spirit. The air in the Dead Soul Forest seemed to have solidified, making people unable to breathe. The low roar came from the deep forest, one after another, like some sleeping giant beast was awakened, carrying endless anger. Casar held the dagger in his hand tightly, and the green flames at his fingertips jumped slightly, reflecting his white face, and his eyes were filled with rings. Vilma stopped walking, leaning on a wooden stick, looking at the direction of the sound, and there was a little more solemnity on his thin face. "It's not a small character to hear," Vilma said in a low voice, as if it was hard from his throat. "The guardianship of the Dead Soul Forest is not just a resentment, there are things older here. You'd better prepare well, boy." Casar clicked the head, but didn't say a word. He could feel the magic in the air being restless, as if a huge force was approaching. His talent, the mortal geese, he heard some vague low-key words, which seemed to be coming from the underground, carrying heavy resentment and anger, like warnings and mockery. He bit his teeth tightly, suppressed the anxiety in his heart, and followed Vilma to move forward. The light in the forest became darker and darker, and the moonlight was almost completely covered by twisted branches, leaving only a piece of darkness that could not be dissolved. Every few steps Vilma would knock on the ground with a wooden stick, and the black wavy spread out, dispersing some resentment hidden in the dark. But those low words did not disappear, but became clearer and clearer, as if they were directly diamonding into Casar's brain. "Don't listen to those sounds." Vilma suddenly turned his head and glanced at him sharply. "They will confuse your mind and make you unable to tell the difference between reality and illusion. Follow me with your heart and don't go away." Casal whined, forcing himself to focus on the path under his feet. He knew that Vilma said it was right. What these resentful people were good at playing with people's minds. When he just learned to die, he was almost dragged into the illusion by a resentful spirit and almost couldn't wake up. But now is not the time I have recalled the past. The roar is getting closer and closer, and the ground is shaking slightly, and the dry trees around are squeaking, as if they will collapse at any time. After about half a minute of leaving, the source of the roar was finally revealed in a clearing of the open space in the middle of the forest. It was a huge bone, made of white bones, and the body looked like a giant bear, but there were 3 skeletons on its head. Each of them had red flames burning in its eyes, and black liquid dripping from its mouth, rotting against the ground. Its limbs were as thick as stone pillars. Every time it took a step, a gap broke open on the ground, and the air around it was distorted by its breath. "Bone Eater." Vilma's voice was so low that it was almost invisible, and there was a slight roar in his eyes. "This guy is one of the guardians of the Dead Soul Forest. The builders of the Dragon Dungeon created it with the magic of the Desolate Spirit, and used it to tear the guys who didn't want to come. Its bones were harder than the iron, and the soul was forbidden in it and would never die." Casal swallowed, feeling sweating in his palms. Although he summoned many dead spirits, he still saw this kind of monster at once. The bone sap seemed to have noticed their existence. The 3 skeletons turned over at the same time, and the ape's flames locked directly on them, making a deafening roar. "Run or hit?" Casar asked in a low voice, his steps unconsciously taking a step back. Although he was not afraid of death, he didn't want to die in vain. "Run? Do you think you've run away?" Vilma sneered, and the wooden stick was stuck on the ground. "Prepare your magic. If you don't solve this, we can't get through this forest." Casal gritted his teeth and pointed to see that he understood. He raised his hand, and the green flames quickly condensed at his fingertips, turning into a long spear burning with the faint fire, ready to throw them out at any time. Vilma said a dark mantra in a low voice, and a black fog appeared at the top of the wooden stick, which quickly spread out and spread, lying towards the bone-eating beast like a living thing. The Bone Eater seemed to be irritated, and the 3 heads opened their mouths at the same time, spraying a black rotten breath, directly pushing them into them. Casar reacted quickly, and his side flashed and heaved the breath, but a dead tree next to him was instantly rotten into a pile of black mud, giving off a pungent odor. He was shocked that the attack of this thing was not something to play with. "Don't be stunned, attack its link." Vilma shouted loudly, and the black fog had already sucked one of the front legs of the Bone Eater, trying to limit its movements. Casar was willing to do so and suddenly threw the long spear in his hand, aiming directly at the knee joint of the bone devouring. The long spear pierced into the gaps in the bones, making a crisp sound. The green flames ignited through the gaps, causing the bone sap to roar in pain. But the monster was stronger than they thought. It shook its legs and shattered its long spear, then slammed over Casal, as fast as a white shadow. Casar felt tight in his heart and quickly summoned a shield condensed by the spirit of the dead, barely slamming the bone pheasant claws, but the whole person was still shocked and flew backwards, hitting a dead tree. His throat became sweet, and he almost vomited blood. "It's dead, this thing is too hard." Casar gritted his teeth and got up, feeling his bones almost falling apart. He looked up and saw that Vilma was using black fog to make the bone sap, but her face became increasingly difficult to see. It was obvious that this level of magic was quite burdened to her. "Don't waste, be careful. Its weakness is in the eye of the head in the center, attacking it." Vilma shouted, gasping, and the wooden stick hit the ground again, and a black slam wave rushed towards the bone sap, barely forcing it back a few steps. Casal pointed his head, pressing the blood that was swollen inside his lower body. He quickly sealed his hands and recited a mantra with low voice. Several skeleton warriors began to appear around him. Although they were just low-level spirits, they could at least distract the attention of the Bone Eater. These skeleton warriors roared and rushed towards the Bone Eater, using their bone knife and claws to attack. Although the damage was almost zero, they successfully slowed down the Bone Eater. Taking advantage of this gap, Casal condensed a long spear of ghostly fire again. This time he poured all his magic into it, and the flames of the spear burned even more vigorously, almost illuminating the entire open space. He aimed at the eye of the head in the center of the Bone Eat and threw it out. The long spear broke through the air, and emitted a sharp sound, which accurately pierced the ape's flame. The Bonesaurus let out a ruthless roar, and the head in the center suddenly exploded, turning into a pile of broken bones, and the ape-red flames instantly extinguished. The remaining two heads seemed to have lost some kind of connection, and their actions became slow, as if they had lost their backbone. Vilma seized the opportunity, and the black fog turned into countless spikes, piercing into the bone pheasant's junction, tearing its limbs to pieces. Finally, the monster let out an unwilling growl, collapsed and turned into a pile of scattered bones, and the flames of the apes were finally extinguished. Casal panted heavily, feeling the strength in his body was drained. He sat down against a dead tree, wiped the sweat from his head, and muttered in his mouth, "If you come here again, I'm really dead." Vilma hummed and walked to him with a wooden stick. Although his face was pale, there was a little more conviction in his eyes. "No, boy, I didn't expect you to be really capable. But this is just the first link. The things in the dragon dungeon are much scarier than this. Are you sure you should continue?" Casal sneered and looked up at her. "Do you think I have a way out?" "Revenge is my only way. No matter what is ahead, I will continue." Vilma was silent for a while, looking at him with a confused look, and finally he just sighed, "Follow you, but remember, the power of the destruction is to use the double-blade sword. The more you use, the closer you will fall from the wall. Don't end up, your soul will be destroyed." Casar did not answer, but looked down at the green flames left by his fingertips, and a slight silence in his eyes. He knew that Vilma was right. Every time he used the magic of destruction, he could feel a cold darkness growing in his heart, like a whisper, making him long for more power. But he quickly slammed his head and threw these thoughts out of his brain. The revenge has not been completed yet, and he has no time to think about these. The two of them took a short rest and continued to set off. The depth of the Dead Soul Forest is more distinct than outside, and the shapes of the trees are becoming more and more distorted. Some are even like human figures, with branches like arms, and they will catch people passing by at any time. Casal could hear more lowly sounds, like countless souls crying, or like cursing. He ignored it, but the sounds still pierced his brain like a slight, making him feel a little nervous. After about 2 hours of leaving, the forest finally arrived at the end, and an open valley appeared in front of it. In the middle of the valley, a huge stone door stood, with a roaring dragon carved on it, lifelike, as if it would come out at any time. There are countless white bones scattered around the door, some of which are human and some are wild, as if they are complaining about the departure of countless failures. There was a strong breath of death in the air, making people feel instinctively uneasy. "This is the entrance to the dragon dungeon," Vilma stopped and his voice was low. "I and a few veterans went there that year. But it was easy to get in, but it wasn't that simple to get out." Casar looked at the stone door and felt an inexplicable pressure in his heart. He could feel some huge force behind the door sleeping, as if he would wake up and devour everything at any time. But he did not retreat, and the flame of revenge burned even more vigorously in his heart. He turned to Vilma and asked, how to go in. This door doesn't seem to be pushed open at will. Vilma grinned and showed a yellow-black teeth. Of course it's not pushed open. There is a restriction engraved on this door, and only those who have passed the exam can enter. You have to touch it with your magic, and then, pray that you can survive. Casar raised his eyebrows, but he didn't expect such an operation to happen. He hesitated for a moment, walked forward, reached out and pressed it on the cold surface of the stone door. In an instant, a powerful magic power surged out from the door, rushing into his body like a flood, causing his whole body to shake, and he almost knelt down. He gritted his teeth, stabilized his body, and began to use his destructive magic to respond to this force. The giant dragon carving on the stone door seemed to have come alive, with a red ray of light lit up in his eyes and a low roar. Casar felt his consciousness was pulled into a dark space, and there was no silence around him, only a few low-pitched voices echoed in his ears, as if trying to tear his mind apart. He knew that this was a test at sure men. If he couldn't stand it, he might never wake up. Casar Shadow Bone. A low voice echoed in his brain, as if it was coming from the underground. Why did you come? Power? Revenge? Or death? Casal gritted his teeth and replied firmly, I came for revenge. No matter what the price is, I will get the power of the dragon soul. The sound was silent for a while, and then a low smile came out. Okay. Then let me see if you have the qualifications to step into this forbidden area. As the voice fell, Casar felt a huge pressure crushing towards him, as if the whole world was collapsing. The magic power in his body was regulating, fighting against that force. Sweat slid down his head, and his teeth were chewing. I don't know how long it took, but the pressure finally subsided. The dragon carving on the stone door returned to its level again, and the ape red light was extinguished. Casal gasped heavily and felt as if he had been walking around the ghost gate. He looked back at Vilma and found that she was looking at him with a complicated look, as if she was surprised and as if she was worried. I didn't expect you to be there. Vilma said in a low voice, with a disbelief in his temperament. When I first touched this door, I almost woke up. You guys are a bit special. Casal ignored her award, just wiped her sweat and asked, what about now? How is the door open? Vilma pointed to a groove in the middle of the door and said, put your magic in, and the door will open itself. But before entering, I have to remind you that the things in the dungeon are 100 times more terrifying than the Dead Soul Forest. If you regret it, you still have time to turn away. Casal snorted coldly, without saying a word, walked directly to the groove, reached out and poured a long green flame into it. In an instant, a low sound of silence appeared from the stone door, opening to both sides, revealing a deep passage, which was as dark as if it could swallow everything. A cold wind blew out of the passage, carrying a heavy breath of death, making people instinctively terrified. Casar looked at the passage and felt an inexplicable sense of anxiety in his heart. He knew that this was the real beginning, and the secrets and dangers in the dungeon were waiting for him. But no matter what it is, he will not retreat. He must go to the end of the road to revenge. Vilma stood behind him, staring at the passage with deep eyes, and said in a low voice, let's go, boy, let me see what step you can go. The two of them looked at each other, and then stepped into the endless darkness. The air in the passage became colder and colder, like a soul that could contain people, and some low sounds were heard everywhere, like the roar of a giant dragon, or like the cry of a dead soul. Casar held the fastening dagger and his heartbeat was beating faster and faster, but he didn't stop because he knew that the real challenge had just begun. The darkness in the passage was like a living thing, wrapped tightly around Casar and Vilma, and his footsteps were reverberating between the empty stone walls, as if someone was talking in the dark. The air was biting cold, carrying a strong and decayed breath that made people unable to help but hold their breath. Casal held the dagger in his hand tightly, and the green flames at his fingertips jumped weakly, barely illuminating the path ahead of him. He could feel that the breath of death here was 100 times stronger than that of the Dead Soul Forest. Every step he took was like moving towards the ground. Vilma walked in front, his wooden stick hitting the ground lightly, making a low sound. She seemed to be familiar with this passage, and her steps were as stable as if she was walking in her backyard, but her back was full of tightness, as if she knew what would happen next. Casar glanced at her and asked in a low voice, "How many times have you been here? It looks like you are familiar." Vilma hummed and didn't look back. He said in a silence, "Familiar? I almost died here that year, why did I not know it? But it's useless to tell you. The dungeons of giant dragons have never been a place that is unchanging. It will change according to the people coming in. You think there is a road ahead, but you may become a trap in the next second. Be careful, don't ask." Casar held his shoulders and did not open his mouth again. He knew that Vilma was not wrong, the magic waves here were like a porridge, and even his dead spirits were warning, and the low words became clearer and clearer, as if countless souls were roaring in his ears, making his brain snorted a little. Suddenly, Vilma stopped suddenly, and the wooden stick was stuck on the ground, making a sound. Casar almost bumped into her. When he thought about what was going on, he heard a deep gecko coming from the depth of the passage, like something huge was moving. The ground began to shake slightly, the stones on the wall fell, and the air was so intense that it was suffocating. "Here," Vilma muttered in a low voice, a look of jealousy flashed in his eyes. She turned to Casal and said in a hurry, "Prepare well, the first defense here is not a small character. If you can't hold on, just hide behind me and don't show off." Casal sneered, and the green flames burned more vigorously in his palms. "Hidden? Old lady, you underestimate me too much. Come on, let me see what kind of ability this dungeon has." As the voice fell, the light of the two apes lit up in the darkness of the passage, like two ghost fires, approaching them. As the light approached, a huge bone dragon appeared from the darkness, all of which were composed of white bones. Each bone was filled with ancient runes, radiating a dark blue light. The ape-red flames burned in its eyes. When it opened its mouth, a row of sharp bones and teeth appeared, and a deafening roar was heard, which shocked Casar's ears buzzed. "Bone Dragon Guard." Vilma gritted his teeth, with a bitter sound in his voice. "It was this thing that made me eat the big one. Its bones were reinforced by magic, and ordinary attacks were useless. The only weakness was the rune core in the chest. It would fall down if it shattered that one." Casal clicked his head, his eyes locked on the blue light on the dragon's chest. "The runes in that place are denser than other places, and they are jumping like the heart, emitting strong magic waves." Without saying a word, he quickly sealed his hands with both hands, recited a spell in a low voice, and several skeletons climbed up from the ground, roared towards the bone dragon, trying to distract it. The bone dragon seemed to be angry and swung its tail suddenly. The huge bone tail blew over like a whip, instantly smashing several skeleton warriors into pieces, and bone chips were filled with bone chips. Casar took advantage of this gap, and the green flame in his hand condensed into a long spear, aiming at the core of the chest of the bone dragon, and suddenly threw it out. The long spear broke through the air and emitted a sharp sound, accurately hitting the group of blue light, but only a crisp sound was emitted. The blue light was just a little dimmed, and the dragon seemed to be fine, roaring at him. "It's dead, so hard." Casar gritted his teeth, and quickly flashed his body, barely avoiding the slash of the dragon's claws, but his shoulders were still wiped, and his clothes were torn apart in an instant, and his skin was sore. He felt a cold magic coming in from the wound, diamonding into his bones like a poisonous snake, making half of his body numb. "Don't come hard, use magic to weaken it." Vilma shouted loudly, and a black fog appeared at the top of the wooden stick, quickly spreading and scattering, lying around the limbs of the bone dragon, trying to limit its movements. The black fog is like a living thing, swaying the bones of the dragon, making a sizzling sound, slowing its movements down. Casal gasped heavily, and the pain of the lower wound was pressed again with both hands. This time he did not summon the skeleton warriors again, but directly tuned the destruction magic in his body and recited a taboo mantra with a low voice in his mouth. His pupils instantly turned green, and the air around him began to condense, and countless black touching hands appeared on the ground, like claws stretched out from the ground, slamming the bone wings and neck of the bone dragon, pressing it tightly to the ground. "It's now!" Vilma saw the stick suddenly, and the black fog turned into a huge knife, slashing hard at the core of Gulong's chest. Casar was not idle either, and condensed the last long spear of the ghostly fire, and threw it out with all his strength. The two forces simultaneously hit the blue light, making a deafening explosion. The blue light finally exploded and turned into countless pieces. The bone dragon roared unwillingly, and the whole body collapsed and turned into a pile of scattered white bones. Casar panted heavily, feeling the strength in his body was drained, and his knees almost fell down. He stood firmly against the wall, wiped the sweat from his head, and muttered in his mouth, "Is this thing more difficult than the bones in the Deer Soul Forest? Are there such monsters in the dungeon?" Vilma hummed, his face as white as paper, but there was a little more conviction in his eyes. "This is wherever you go. Gulong Shogun is just an appetizer. The more you go, the more terrifying the things are. If you are shouting tired now, you should go back as soon as possible." Casar sneered and did not answer. He knew Vilma was motivating him, but he also knew that the danger here was far beyond his imagination. But the flame of revenge was burning even more vigorously in his heart. No matter what was ahead, he would not stop. The two of them took a break and continued to walk along the passage. The passage became narrower and narrower, and the runes on the wall became denser and denser, emitting a dark blue light, jumping like a living thing. Casar could hear more low-pitched voices, like countless souls crying, or as if warning. He gritted his teeth, suppressed his anxiety, and followed Vilma to a huge stone hall. There is a sacrificial tent in the center of the stone temple, filled with ancient runes, radiating a strong breath of death. Several groups of blue flames floated around the sacrificial priest, like souls, spiraling. Casar realized at a glance that this place should be a place for the call, and his goal, the dragon soul, was sleeping in a corner of this dungeon. "This is one of the cores of the dungeon," Vilma said in a low voice, with a scattered look in his eyes. "I and a few veterans were trying to wake up the dragon souls here. As a result, you saw that we failed and almost dragged the entire land into the ground. Boy, I'll ask you one last time, do you really want to continue? Once the call starts, no one can guarantee that you can control that thing." Casar was silent for a while, looking at the runes on the fort. His eyes were as sure as iron. "I don't have to choose, Vilma. Revenge is my only way. Whether it is the soul of the dragon or the devil of the earth, as long as the sacred flame riders can pay for the price, I will be willing to pay anything." Vilma sighed, as if he had expected that he would say this. She didn't move anymore, but walked to the sacrificial priest, pointed to a groove in the center and said, "Inject your magic into it, and the slogan will start it on its own. But I remind you that the dragon soul is not a good person, it will try to swallow your soul. If you can't hold it back, it will become its puppet." Casar clicked a little, walked to the fort, took a deep breath, reached out his hand, and poured a length of green flame into the groove. In an instant, the runes on the fort lit up and emitted a dazzling light. The entire stone hall began to shake, as if some huge force was awakening. Casar felt a cold magic coming out of the fort, rushing into his body like a flood, causing his whole body to shake, and he almost kneeled down. At the same time, a low voice echoed in his brain, as if it was coming from the underground, carrying an indefinite threat, "Casar Shadow Bone. How dare you wake me up, Saglas Flame Throat? Are you ready to bear my anger?" Casar gritted his teeth and pressed down on the fear in his heart. He replied with a sound, "I'm not here to pick you. I need your strength to help me revenge. As long as you help me, I'm willing to pay any price." The sound of laughter came out, as if mocking, as if it was admiration. "Appointment? Young man, you don't know what you are saying. Well, since you desire strength so much, I will give you a chance. Come to my prison and face me. If you can survive, my strength is yours." As the voice fell, a huge gap broke in the center of the sacrificial fortification, revealing a passage leading to a deeper point. There was a tremendous darkness in the passage, like a light that could swallow everything. A terrifying force came from it, making Casar's heart beat almost stop. He knew that this was where Saglas Flamethroat was, the fallen dragon spirit, the most terrifying existence in the dungeon. Vilma stood behind him, looking at the passage with a slight look, and said in a low voice, "This is the last step, boy. Go in, you may never come out." "Are you really ready?" Casar didn't turn around, but said coldly, "I have never been ready, but I must go on." After speaking, he held the dagger tightly, took a step, and stepped into the endless darkness. The power in the passage became stronger and stronger, as if countless hands were pulling his soul, making every step he took was like carrying a mountain on his back. Casar could hear Sagras's low voice, as if it was directly heard in his brain, carrying confusion and ridicule. "Come on, young man, let me see your determination, what a delicious sacrifice your soul will be." After walking for a while, the passage finally reached its head and a huge underground cave appeared in front of it. In the middle of the cave, a huge dragon-dead spirit plate lies there, consisting of black bones, each of which is covered with dark red flames, like the flames of the earth. The ape-red light burned in its eyes, as if it could see through everything. The huge bone wings spread out, covering the sky, and the dissipating pressure made Casar almost suffocate. Sagra's flame throat. Casal muttered in a low voice, a shaking sound. He could feel that the soul of this giant dragon's demise had been completely corrupted by darkness, and the magic power emitted seemed to be able to devour all life. He knew that this battle might be his last battle. "Young man, you're here." Sagras's voice was as low as a thunderbolt, shaking the whole cave trembled. "I've been waiting for 1,000 years, and finally someone dared to step into my prison. Tell me, what do you want? Power? Or destroy?" Casal bit his teeth tightly, raised his head, and looked into the red eyes of the ape. "I want revenge. I need your strength to help me destroy my enemy." Saglas smiled softly, and his bone wings slammed a violent wind, causing Casar to take a few steps back. "Revenge? Ridiculous reason. But I like your determination. Come on, prove your value. If you can defeat me, my power will be yours. But if you fail, your soul will always belong to me." As the voice fell, Sagras opened his mouth and sprayed a dark red flame, like the ground flame, directly thrusting into Casal. Casar reacted quickly and quickly summoned a destruction shield to barely hold the flames, but the whole person was still shocked by the heat waves and flew backwards. He hit the stone wall of the cave, and his throat was sweet and he spit out a mouthful of blood. "Damn it, this guy is not something I can deal with." Casar gritted his teeth and got up, feeling his bones all over his body almost falling apart. He knew that Saglas's strength was far beyond his imagination, and that he might really be dead in this battle. But the flame of revenge was burning even more vigorously in his heart. He would not retreat even if he died. He sealed his hands and recited a taboo mantra in a low voice. The magic of the dead spirit in his body was adjusted to the limit. The air around him began to condense, and countless black touches appeared on the ground, and he rolled towards Sagras. At the same time, he condensed the last long spear of the ghostly fire, and threw it out with all his strength, pointing directly to Saglas's eyes. Saglas let out a low growl and a slap of bone wings, easily shattering the black touches. The long spear of the ghost fire hit its eyes, but only a brittle sound was made, leaving no traces behind. It roared and swung at Casal, and its huge bone claws slapped down hard, as if it could crush everything. Casar felt tight in his heart, and he kept slid into his body, and he reluctantly avoided the blow, but his shoulders were still wiped, his clothes were torn open in an instant, and his skin was sore. He felt a dark magic coming in from the wound, diamonding into his bones like a poisonous snake, making half of his body numb. "Young man, you're too weak." Sagras's voice laughed, like a cat playing with a pet. "I'll accept your soul." Casar bit his teeth and felt his consciousness begin to blur, and Sagras's low voice became more and more disturbing in his brain, as if countless hands were pulling his soul, making him almost unable to think. But at this moment, a sound of a sand suddenly erupted, as if it was coming from a distance. "Boy, don't give up. Use your dead spirit to fight it. It's Vilma." Casar's heart was shocked and he suddenly came back to his mind. He saw Vilma standing at the entrance of the cave, with black flames burning at the top of the wooden stick, as if he was supporting something with all his strength. She shouted, "Sagras, your opponent is me. I couldn't kill you that year, and today I'll take this knife." Speaking, Vilma suddenly slammed over, and the black fog turned into countless spikes, stabbing Sagla's bone wings, successfully attracting its attention. Casar seized this opportunity, strengthened the pain in his lower body, and recited a mantra in a low voice to regulate the power of the dead spirit. His pupils turned into a dark green color, and his mind directly connected to Sagras's soul, trying to shape its will. "Raise my brain, little slut." Saglas roared, a burst of anger flashing from the red eyes, and a huge mental pressure crushed towards Casal, as if it could tear his soul apart. Casar bit his teeth and his sweat slid down his head, but he did not retreat and fought Saglas with all his strength. At the same time, Vilma used a black fog to make Sagras's movements. The wooden stick suddenly slammed, and a black slam wave slammed hard on its chest, making a deafening explosion. Saglas let out a painful roar, his body slightly weakened, and his mental pressure instantly weakened. "It's now!" Vilma shouted loudly, and Casar was willing and suddenly injected all the magic into the dead spirit, piercing into the depths of Sigilla's soul like a sharp blade. He heard a silence of cry, and Sagras's will was finally suppressed by him for a moment, and his huge body stiffened in place, as if he had lost control. Casal gasped, feeling his consciousness was almost shattering, but he knew that this was the last chance. With the last force, he condensed a long spear burning with green flames, aimed at a dark red light in Saglas's chest, it was its soul core, and rushed out. The long spear broke through the air, and emitted a sharp sound, accurately hitting the light. Sagras let out a roar that shook the earth, and the dark red light exploded in an instant, turning into countless pieces. The huge body collapsed, turning into a pile of scattered black bones, and the ape's flames finally extinguished. Casar's knees were soft, and he finally couldn't hold back. He fell to the ground, panting heavily, and felt that all the strength in his body had been drained. Vilma walked to him, his face as white as paper, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes. "No, boy, you really did." Casal raised his head hard and asked with a sound of sadness, "Is it dead?" Vilma clicked a little and said in a low voice, "Its soul has been destroyed by you, but the power of the dragon soul is still asleep here. You can choose to accept it, or leave it." Casar was silent for a while, looking at the scattered black bones of Saglas, a look flashed with a silk silence in his eyes. He knew that accepting this force might cause him to fall into darkness, but he also knew that the road to revenge had not been completed, and the Holy Flame Riders were still waiting for him outside. Finally, he gritted his teeth, stood up, and walked towards a group of blue light in the middle of the cave that was Saglas's reign. He stretched out his hand and touched the light gently. In an instant, a cold magic power rushed into his body, shaking his soul like a flood. He clenched his teeth, pressed down on the dark awkwardness, and said in a low voice, "I will not be your puppet. This power is mine." The light slowly merged into his body, and Casar felt his magic turbulent, as if he could destroy everything, but at the same time, a cold darkness also grew in his heart, as if he was whispering. He knew that this was just the beginning, the real challenge, and was waiting for him outside. Vilma looked at his back with a confused look, as if he was trying to say something, but in the end he just sighed and turned around and walked out of the cave. Casal clamped his fist tightly and turned to look at the exit of the cave, his eyes as if it were iron. He knew that the road to revenge was still long, but now, he finally had enough strength to face everything.